Hello everybody and welcome back to another lab series video. Today we're going to do kind of a long video. We're going to get into a full end-to-end demo of the platform, basically kind of a recap of all the features and capabilities today. So I'm going to do this from the developer's perspective because it's a little bit simpler that way, but it will cover all of the features. So what we're looking at right now is kind of our test version of the partner dashboard where partners can see all of their merchants, all of their volume. And we're going to start with kind of a cold and dry terminal. So I'm going to go to under developer tools, and you can see this thing, it says test merchant. So we're going to create a test merchant or a demo merchant. So this shows you how easy it is for a developer to add a test merchant for their own purposes. So I'll go ahead and go in here and I'll type demo merchant and I'll hit submit. And now it's created a new merchant for me. I can go in here and look and see the merchant is a test account. It does not have any terminals. So I'm going to start by giving it a terminal. So I'll go into activate terminal here. I'm going to touch to activate on my terminal. This is exactly how a terminal would show up when out of the box when you get it. It's going to generate some keys and do a quick generate a code. So all I do is type that code in. I'll give it a name. I'll call it test terminal. I will enable cloud relay, which will allow me to use the virtual terminal with this as well. And I will click activate. And now you can see the terminal is now here on my list. It still shows up as offline though. So if you look over here, it's still sort of going through its motions. One of the interesting things about how BlockChyp terminals work with respect to encryption is we don't use the traditional duckput or kind of shared secret forms of encryption that are used throughout the payment industry. Most credit card encryption is there's a key derived from some base derivation key somewhere that's injected into the terminals, and so those secrets have to be protected, and that's why you end up with these really draconian rules about key injection. The way BlockChyp works is because there's blockchains involved, a blockchain key pairs are generated for the merchant, and they're generated on the terminal when it's activated, and then a base derivation key for encryption is arrived at through elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman. And so this means that you don't have to worry about a terminal being shipped out with the wrong keys because the keys aren't even generated until you activate it. So that's kind of why it goes through that process. Okay, now that my terminal's been activated, let's monitor it. Let's look at it remotely. So if you click on the terminal here, you can go to the terminal status screen. This will show you a couple of key things about the terminal. You can see what the active logo is. We'll get into how you change that in a little bit. A picture of the type of terminal, and a couple of interesting things. The terminal checks in with our system every hour with updated information. So we know how much memory is currently in use on the terminal, how much storage is currently in use on the terminal. We can monitor those things in case we might run into problems. And also what the IP address of the terminal is on the local network, because we assume these are going to be locked behind a private network. And this IP address is key to how our system allows terminals to be located even when they're using DHCP. When you get a BlockChyp terminal, you don't have to configure it with static IPs. You should, and we recommend that, but you don't have to. And so the system is resilient even if you just take the terminal out of the box and plug it in with no other configuration. Okay, so now that we've got the terminal activated, let's go to the virtual terminal and let's run a test transaction. So here on the virtual terminal, you can see I've got a couple of different options. I can go here and hit test terminal, and that will allow me to basically route this transaction to a terminal rather than hand enter it. So I'll go ahead and enter just a random amount here, and I'm going to click charge. And then over here on the terminal, you will see that it wakes up. I'll take one of my BlockChyp test cards, and I'll use a no CVM card for now, and I will put it in, run the transaction. The transaction is approved, and I'll remove it. And so now you can see here on the dashboard, there's my transaction. It shows up. If I look at the details, we capture a lot of detail about these transactions. So all the different types of amounts that might be relevant. For EMV data, it shows every single EMV tag is recorded in here, other than the ones that are sensitive, like track equivalent data and PANs and things like that. So the really important ones would be the application cryptogram. This is kind of the digital signature of the transaction. So you can always go in and take a peek at that. And these should be on POS receipts as well. Let's do another transaction. This time we're gonna do one that has a signature CVM. I'll go back to test terminal, and I will do a fake amount here, and I'll hit charge. This time I will use a signature CVM. And there it goes. And I will put the card in. Okay, and now it's prompting me for signature, so I'll just kind of draw some squiggles on there and hit done and remove the card. And one of the things I want to show you about this is because this particular transaction had a signature, we actually record the signature for you. So if you want to go in and look at the signature, you can. You just click inspect and you can see the actual signature. So that looks pretty close to what I signed. Most payment systems take this signature storage thing and they make it they kind of wave their hands and say not our problem. Typically it's something they expect the point of sale system to handle. But we do store it for you. The point of sale system can also get the signature back with the API call. So if you want the signature in hex format or as a file, and you can specify if you want PNG or JPEG. And I think we support GIF as well. So we can convert, if you want to save the signature, you can in your point of sale system, but you don't have to. We'll keep it in our system for you if you want. Let's do another transaction. This time we'll do one with a magnetic stripe card. So I'll go ahead and set up another test transaction, and I'll hit charge. And I'm being prompted, so I'll use a mag stripe card this time. And again, I'm prompted for a signature. I'll hit done. It's approved. We'll see the transaction details. I'll inspect it, and there's the signature. And you can see our batches starting to build up here. We also have a batch detail screen. So if I were to go to this view all transactions in current batch, you would see the status of the current batch. You'd see all the transactions broken down by card brand. You'd see all the transactions broken down by entry method. In this case, we've had 2 chip cards and 1 swipe. And currently all the transactions have been captured. Let's see what happens if we get a decline. So I'll go back to the virtual terminal. And we have, at the back of every BlockChyp test card, there's a list of trigger amounts for various simulations, but we also have test cards, because one of the reasons that we wanted to have test cards for things like partial authorizations, timeouts, and there's one for declines, is because when you're testing in the context of the point of sale system, sometimes it can be tricky to get, once you factor in tax and all the other things, to get a test order in your POS to work out to an exact amount every time to simulate a certain condition. Maybe you don't want to have to worry about setting all of that up, and you just want to simulate a decline. So I'll go ahead and put in an arbitrary amount here for a transaction. I'll hit test terminal. I'll hit charge. The terminal will wake up. I will swipe the BlockChyp decline test card, and I'll swipe it. And I get a declined result back. And now if I go into the virtual terminal or into the batch, the dashboard, you'll see there's the declined transaction. If I view it in the current batch, you can see that this shows up as a declined transaction in my, if broken down by status. So all of that is in there. All right. Let's talk about terminal branding. So one of the processing transactions is pretty normal. Everybody does that. What our system does is it makes it very easy for you to change what's going on in the terminal. So the simplest way is to change the logo. So let's say you want to put your own logo on the terminal instead of the BlockChyp logo, which I assume most of you want to do. What you can do is you can go to Merchant Profile, and you can see all of your settings here for how you can also set your close times and all kinds of interesting things. We'll go ahead and turn manual entry on for later. I can just browse for a file in my local file system. Let me find something. I've got a test media folder, and I'll pick the good old Aviato logo, which will get uploaded, and then I will submit it, and then watch what happens to my terminal. Immediately the logo shows up on the terminal. Now, if you had 1,000 terminals linked with your merchant account, 1,000 terminals logos would change all at once. That's how it works. So, I mean, contrast this to how personalizing and branding terminals works in a lot of other payment systems. It can take weeks. It can require firmware updates. It can be very complicated. In our system, it's instantaneous. And the image that you upload does not have to be pre-formatted to a certain size. We auto-scale and crop and adjust it to whatever you happen to upload. So that's sort of how images work on our system. Now, that's not the only thing that you can do. You can also create slideshows. So we have this setting over here where you can create, maybe you want to have a rolling slideshow where the system shows a sequence of promotions or product images or customer images, things like that. So you can create a slideshow, and we'll go ahead and create one. I'm just going to call it test slideshow. And I'll enable it. I want to put 5 seconds between slides. And I can upload new images, or I can pick from my existing library. I'm going to pick some new images. I'm going to pick Pied Piper here. And we'll do Bream Hall. And we'll do, let's see. And we'll just do the BlockChyp gift card logo as well. Let's do one more. Let's do an image of the terminal. Gotcha. So we've done all of these. So I've got a 4-slideshow ready, 5 seconds between slides. So to activate it, all I have to do is make sure it's enabled and click submit and wait a couple of seconds. And there it is. You can see it on the terminal, already working. There's the next logo. There's the next logo. And there's the next logo. And then it just repeats like that. So that's how slideshows work. Okay, so that's slideshows. Now, in addition to just static logos and slideshows, we can also do full motion video on the terminals. And we've gone through a lot of trouble to make that easy, so you don't have to worry about formatting and sizes and scaling and stuff. So typically the right way to handle that is to go to the media library, where you'll see all the stuff you've uploaded so far. And you can also upload video. So I'm gonna upload a video. Let me just show you the video first. So we have this B-roll, essentially, of a winery, a kind of thing you'd want to see, like maybe a tasting room might want to show on their terminal while they're waiting for things to, well, the terminal is idle. So we're going to take this video and we're going to upload it so we can show it on the terminal. What we'll do is you click Choose File. Hang on a second. So what we'll do is we'll go to the media library, we'll click Choose File, we'll select that video file. And this is a pretty big file. It's about 100 megs here, so we're going to wait for it to upload. Okay, so the video has successfully uploaded. Now you see the video processing image. Now, this is pretty standard. If you've ever uploaded videos to YouTube or Facebook, you're kind of used to this. And what's happening here is that that original video is not the right size, not the right format. And so what's happening right now behind the scenes is that we're actually transcoding the video to the exact size and dimensions that are optimized for the payment terminal. So that'll take a little time. See, there it is. So now the terminal, so now you can see the video has been transcoded. So now if I go over to my terminal video screen, I click Browse, I select that video, and I click Submit. And now let's watch the terminal. So it's not going to be immediately instantaneous because it will take a little bit to download the video to the terminal. Okay, and now you can see there's the video. So that's what it looks like when video starts playing on the terminal. It's really pretty slick. This is a neat feature. And again, you don't really have to be some kind of video expert to prepare a video. You really can take just kind of any video you want in most common formats that are out there. So we don't really specify. We prefer MPEG, but any standard format like QuickTime you could upload, and we'll convert it to the proper format for the terminal. So that's how you would do terminal branding. Let's look at some other features. So you have in the dashboard, you've got a couple of things here. So you've got settings. You can look at your merchant profile. I touched on this earlier, but let's get into a little bit more detail. You have the ability to specify what your local time zone is, and if you specify this, all your reports, all your data will show up in that time zone. You can specify what payment methods you want to accept. Some people don't want to take American Express, so if that was you just uncheck that, and then American Express would no longer be accepted. You can change your batch settings. So by default, batches close automatically, and then you can specify, basically which hour of the day you would like your batches to close. This is the default. But for example, if the point of sale system does manual batch closure, which is really common in restaurants where you don't want your batches to close until all the tip adjustments have been entered, and that could happen at the wee hours of the morning, you have the ability to turn auto batch closure off. Then there's terminal settings. And these are little things that you can adjust about the terminal. Like, for example, if you're using paper signatures on your receipts and you don't want us to capture them, you would just turn that off. If you want to enable manual fallback, being able to, a transaction to fall back to hand keying in the transaction, you would turn this on. Update is also when terminals should update firmware. So we do have the ability to update terminal firmware remotely. And this setting determines, what time of the morning a firmware update would get released if there is one. And they're not super often. There might be a firmware update maybe once or twice a month. It's not an every night kind of thing. So that's how you would do that. Let's get into some more interesting stuff. So we have the ability to also do surveys. So let's say you want to ask your customers a question or two after every transaction. So you have the ability to do that right here by going to surveys. So I could click Add Question. I can enable it. There's a couple of common questions here that you might, if you're not feeling super creative, if you just want to do something simple, you can just select one of these. It shows up right there. You click Submit. Let me add another question. Let's write your experience today. And we recommend you don't go any more than 3. You can if you want, but it's not really ideal. Let's see. Okay, let's add some more questions. Would you refer a friend? Yes or no? Let's do an original question too. Let's see, let's write one of our own. Let's make this scale of 1 to 5. Let's see. How happy are you today? Something silly that the marketing team might like. So we'll save that. And you notice that we have these little handles here, so you can adjust the order in which the questions are asked. So I could drag this one up here. And you can notice that they're enabled or disabled. So only 3 of these questions are actually enabled right now. Okay, now that my survey is set up, I should be able to, the questions will get asked at the end of every single transaction. So I'll go to Virtual Terminal, and I'll enter another transaction. And I'll select my terminal, hit Charge. And see, there I get a transaction prompt. I'll go ahead and put in a no CVM card just to speed things up for us so it doesn't ask for a signature. It's approved. I remove the card. And see, there it is. There's my question. I just touch my answers. And that's that. And that's how it works. Now, the way this works is if at any point in the survey process, if the customer just gets annoyed and chooses not to answer one of the questions and just basically walks away, there's a 30-second timeout. So because of that, we also track a response rate. I'm going to do a couple more transactions just so we can see some meaningful data. Let's do this one. And bear in mind that we only ask the questions for approved transactions. So for pre-auths and charge transactions that are approved. We don't do it for refunds or any kind of declined or error transaction because you might not get good answers. All right, so I'll go ahead and swipe a card this time. So you can see how this works with a signature. So I'll go ahead and sign, hit done. A short delay so you can see the approved message, and then you have the ability to start answering some of the questions. All right, so I'm giving some different answers. Let's do one more, and then I'll show you what the results look like. All right, let's do 78.89. Okay, let's make this one a MagStripe MasterCard. We'll do that. There we go. And the system is approved. And let's answer our survey questions. Okay, cool. And we got feedback. All right, let's go back into surveys and see what the data looks like. So if you want to see what your results were, you just click on a question. It opens this up. You see you see a little bit of detail on the question. You see some details about about what the exact answers were, and you see a response rate, right? So this shows you the response rate based on the number of transactions. You'll notice that we have transactions, so this is based on the current time frame of all the transactions that existed. So we see a lower response rate because we didn't have the survey in place for this entire period. But you can see a nice bar chart. You can also update the results, look at them over a period of time, you can do that. So that's a yes, no answer. Let's look at one of the multiple choice ones. Scale of 1 to 5. How happy are you today? Okay, so, and you can see there's the response rates, and you see a little bit more detail at how it breaks down. You also see the average transaction amount. So whenever you, so if there is any kind of correlation between how much money people spend and their experience, you'll be able to see that here. And then, of course, we'll think of new cool things to throw in here later. Like, it might be interesting to see how this breaks down by card brand or entry method, or, you know, is there some difference between people who use chip cards, Amex versus Discover, all that stuff. So we'll get into all of that. So let's look at some of the reporting. So let's say I want to look at my batch report. I can go into a batch, and I'm going to just manually close this batch for fun. So I'll go ahead and close it. The batch is now closed. So I can see all my detail about all the different transactions. I can go ahead and go in and look at things. And then I have the ability to, if I want like a nice PDF where I can see all of this stuff, I click this, download PDF, and you can see here's your batch detail report. And there are some merchants that like to have, you know, a good paper trail at the end of every day, and this is how you would do it. So this is a pretty sort of standard report that has all the detail that you might need. And then the key number here is total volume. This number is the net volume. So any kind of refunds or offsets, that's the amount of the deposit you should expect to get when your batch settles, is that number. All right. Okay, let's take a look at what if you want to order more terminals. So there's this Order Terminals button, and you have the ability to go in here and just create an order and add additional terminals. And then this works just like a standard e-commerce system, where you can use an address. It integrates with UPS. We get the rates instantly. You can enter a card payment method and check out, and then we'll get the order and we'll ship you a terminal. If you're a merchant, all you can buy is a terminal right now. That we may add accessories later, different terminal types, that kind of thing. Where it gets a little more interesting is if you're a developer, because there's a more expanded catalog for developers where you can get a terminal kit. You can also get test cards. EMV test cards are actually quite expensive, so you can order those separately, but a lot of developers already have these. Because we basically just have our own branded version of the standard B2 test cards. Our test card kit has a mixture of CVMs in all 4 of the major card brands, so you can at least kind of touch all the different areas, even though you're not subject to EMV certification. And then, of course, you've got a list of test merchants. One of the interesting things about our system is developers can have as many test merchants as they want with completely different settings and even completely different adverse event handling mechanisms. And just to give you some context on what that means, adverse events would be simulating things other than approvals. So the test card set you get from us conforms to all of this, right? But if you wanted to adjust things, like say you wanted a different trigger amount or a different card amount, you could add your own adverse events here, and you can enable it. You can give it a name, like a test event. You can pick an event type, like whether you want it to be a partial authorization. Partial auths are a really good example because you can determine the amount of the partial auth. So let's say we'll put that in the default event set. And you can specify a card number or a trigger amount. In this case, we'll just make it a trigger amount. Let's say that the trigger amount is $300. Let's do 301.11, just so it's something a little bit less likely to be entered. And then the response type could be approved because it is a partial authorization. But because it's and then we can do approved as the response. And then we can decide what we want the partial authorized amount to be. So it could be 230, 33, maybe something like that. And then we could enter it. And then if we ran a transaction with that amount, it would get approved for the partial authorization that we specified. And the reason that we did this, most payment systems, there's a standard set of event triggers, and that's that. And of course, we have our own default set. But we also know that a lot of point-of-sale companies have existing test plans in place, existing procedures. Like maybe you've got a whole set of test plans that are geared around some other payment companies, they'll remain nameless, some other payment company's set of test procedures. And you could literally just add all of those in here and just carry on with the same test plan you have and not have to learn new trigger cards and new test amounts. That's basically the idea behind it. What else? We have API documentation. So there's a lot of documentation for developers here. We've got a couple of different things. There's an SDK developers guide for people who want to write their own SDKs, which we don't recommend you do, but you could if you're using a language that's a little squirrely. We also have our terminal REST API. So this is the direct REST API for the terminals themselves, how things work. And then you've got the payment gateway REST API, all the different things that you would need to do with the gateway. You also can have direct access to our GitHub repositories. Okay, I'm going to open this in an incognito to show you what you will see, not what I will see. It's a little different. Okay. Okay, so this is what you would see. So a couple of things that might be useful to you, really there's two. There's the BlockChyp Go SDK, which has two things. If you happen to be developing a point-of-sale system in Go, not super likely, but you might be, this would be your go-to spot. But it's also where our command line interface lives. So if you're using a platform that we don't have an SDK for, or maybe it's a little bit older and you don't really want to make one, you can just use our command line interface. And so there's a lot of information about the command line interface here, about the CLI reference. So everything you would want to know is right here, including releases. You can even download the Go releases right here. If you click there, you can download the binaries. And it's all open source. So even though you're downloading a binary from us, you don't have to take our word for it about what's in it. You could even build it yourself if you want to. There are instructions in there for doing that. If you don't want to just take a binary from us, it will. All right. Okay, let's go into the partner section. So this is how things work for partners. And when we say partner, what we mean is a point-of-sale company that is maybe that's point-of-sale, maybe it's some kind of SaaS platform. So it's a software company that's integrated with us. So you have the ability to look at all of your merchants right here. You can actually see all the volume for all your merchants in real time. So you don't have to wait for a statement at the end of the month. You can see it right here now as the transactions start to flow through the system. You can adjust your partner profile. I haven't set anything up for us yet. You could even have a default logo. For example, if you want when a terminal is activated by default, the BlockChyp logo is on there. But if you could upload the logo for your point of sale solution or your company, and that would show up here instead. So that we don't necessarily care about hijacking your brand. You can, if you want to put your solutions logo on there and then let the merchant decide to override that with their logo later, you can do that. You have the ability, I won't show you pricing right now, but you have the ability to adjust the pricing for your merchants. Now, this applies to new merchants, not old merchants, because there are certain disclosure requirements for that. You also have this notion of systems. So let's say that you're a company that has many point-of-sale systems, not just one. What you could do is you could define them all separately, and then each one could have their own logo. And so if you invited a merchant and maybe identified that merchant as using one particular system, one particular product that you make, the logo for that product could show up on the screen as opposed to just your umbrella company. And then here's how you invite merchants. So let's say that the time has come to invite a merchant to join. All you do is just send them an email right here. So I could do, let's do Jeff, let's do me. And I'll do that. And your invitation's been sent. So that's really all it takes. Once the merchant gets that email address, they pop it open, fill out the form, and you're off to the races. You can also add multiple users to your account. So this is where so the idea that there's one login that everyone has to share, that's not really a thing here. So you can invite as many users as you want. So this would be other people within your company. And you can designate them as developers, finance, or administrators. And then that would determine kind of what tools show up and what doesn't. Okay, so that's pretty much the state of BlockChyp right now. There's a lot more work that we're doing. We just finished ACH support, so the next time you see, I think probably in the next week or so, you'll see an update from us that shows that ACH support has been added to the virtual terminal. And then we'll do another video shortly that gets into the technical details of the command line interface, like how a developer would do an integration with this. I think that might kind of grind us down to a halt here now, but that's something that we'll talk about later. So that's an overview of the current state of the BlockChyp platform from a partner and merchant's perspective. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Lab Series.